Earlier this year, I came across this social media post. The post said, "Some of you may already know that I've experimented with a raw meat diet. It's actually legitimate and has a ton of health benefits. There's a whole sect of raw vegans who really realize that cooking their vegetables cooks the vitamins right out of them. Well, the same is true for meats and other foods. The difference is the vitamins and minerals in fruits and vegetables are already minimal and not very bioavailable or absorbable anyway. And raw vegetables and seeds or legume foods are usually not edible or even chewable before substantial cooking. So veganism is typically a lost cause. With meat, which is rich in B vitamins, iron, and other necessary nutrients, even after cooking, you can still get some of the benefits. However, definitely order that steak as rare as you can handle every chance you get. And if you're feeling brave, start slow and gradual and try some steak tartare." I think that's how you say it. "I've actually been eating a combination of raw meats for over a year and I feel great. Saying I've experimented with raw meat is a bit of an understatement." Immediately red flags. One being that this post was written by a personal trainer. Now, personal trainers are great. They are so helpful. I've found them so valuable for personal training. Now, I'm not sure if this person has a nutrition certificate specifically, but regardless, giving specific recommendations on dietary intake can be outside of scope of practice. I think it's great that personal trainers want to help people with their health, but my concern is more when they get into the nutrition side of things, not just for general nutrition recommendations, but for specific ways of eating that aren't so evidence-based. And when I saw this post, I actually asked for some evidence for those claims, and I was provided with several different articles. Now, this was several months ago. This was actually earlier this year in one of the busiest months that I've had of this year. And so I got those articles, I said thank you, and then I saved them for a later time that I could actually go in and read them. Fast forward to prepping for the 12 days of debunking. I've read them. Let's talk about it. Hi folks, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and on this channel I like to talk about weight inclusive and weight neutral focused approaches to health, as well as diving into scammy and, in my opinion, unethical nutrition related businesses, products, mostly nutrition related MLMs, and other fear mongering nutrition related claims. Now, before we get into those studies, let's give a little bit of background for just raw diets in general. Now, there are many variations within the raw food diet. Someone could be a raw vegan or do a raw meat intake, raw vegetarian. There's just a lot of variations. But overall, the raw food diet overall just involves the consumption of unprocessed, uncooked foods. And it's not universally supported by scientific evidence. The overall health effects of a raw food diet is limited, and the majority of people who I've come in contact who have approached a kind of raw food diet aren't typically on it long term, which is a good thing because there are a lot of kind of drawbacks in my opinion. Now, the overall long-term health effects of a raw food diet is limited. While it is important and I think fair to acknowledge some of the benefits of consuming foods in its raw form, like some of the micronutrients, for example, it's also important to recognize that cooking can enhance the absorption of other micronutrients and also help with the destruction of harmful kind of things like bacteria. Nutritional adequacy, balance overall, and personal health really determines what the best kind of intake pattern is going to be for someone. The raw food diet has a lot of support behind it, but I think it's important to examine or be aware of some of the limitations of it and some of the health risks. One of the major concerns with a raw food diet is nutrient deficiency. For example, a raw vegan diet, that just scares me. That does not sound very nutrient dense. The nutrients of concern for a raw vegan diet are protein intake, vitamin B12, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and iodine. Those are the main kind of nutrients that I'm concerned about when I hear the promotion of something like a raw vegan diet. Now, cooking can decrease some of the micronutrients in food. I'm aware of that. We can talk about that, especially things like water-soluble vitamins, so like the B vitamins, and also vitamin C. However, there are certain kind of cooking methods like microwaving, sauteing, steaming, and pressure cooking that can help with the preservation of those micronutrients. And even more so, cooking can help with the availability, the bioavailability of some of those micronutrients, making them easier for our bodies to utilize, to absorb and utilize. Examples of that would be like tomatoes and asparagus and squash, making them more beneficial than their raw counterparts. So while the raw food diet has some or can have some benefits, it's not without risk and not generally, at least right now, recommended long term. It's essential to focus on a balanced diet. Balance not meaning only the food components, but also like a variety of cooking methods that can help to ensure overall like more adequacy in nutrient intake and support overall health. Now, you might be wondering, did those studies that were shared to me support the idea of a raw food diet? Long story short, no. Long story long, let's get into them. So I went through all of the studies that were provided to me and I kind of made some notes kind of summarizing. I will leave them linked in the description box down below if you want to have a look at them, but I'm going to be reading from some of my notes. All right, so the first one, they were talking about the different cooking methods and its effect on the content of vitamins and the retention of those vitamins in certain vegetables. Now, this did provide some insight on how different cooking affects vitamin content. So it did show that some vitamins can be reduced with certain cooking methods. It also notes that some cooking can increase the availability of others. The other study that was shared with me was specifically talking about B1, vitamin B1 or thiamine in foods, and how the processing of it reduces some of that, the cooking of it. Now, that specifically is known, and I actually pulled up the NIH, the National Library of Medicine, their kind of page discussing thiamine deficiency, because thiamine is one of those ones that it's very rare to have a thiamine deficiency, especially in the Western world. Worldwide, thiamine deficiency is primarily due to inadequate dietary intake, specifically in diets comprised mainly of polished rice and grains. In Western countries, it most commonly presents in patients suffering from alcoholism or chronic illness. It is not very common to have a vitamin B1 deficiency, thiamine. And so even though the cooking process does reduce it, there's a lot of it in a variety of foods overall. So that specific outcome or result of that is not sufficient enough to promote a kind of raw food dietary intake. Having raw foods here and there, yeah, absolutely. I like to have apples that are not cooked and just other raw vegetables. I love to snack on raw vegetables and raw fruits. But that is not sufficient enough to say that overall a raw food diet is the best thing that you can do, or a recommended thing to do. One of the other articles was talking specifically about vitamin C retention. And for that one, I thought it was interesting there. They were talking about varying effects on different vegetables like spinach, peas, green beans, and okra. And the study found that not thawing the frozen vegetables before cooking and using minimal water, that makes sense, but not thawing before cooking helped to preserve some of the vitamin C. Now, one of the other studies that was sent to me, this one, let's just get into it. I don't just rely on the abstracts, but this one, the abstract, I have to talk about it. Information on vitamin contents of cooked foods is essential for assessing the adequacy of vitamin intakes. There is a growing trend to consume ready-to-eat foods such as stuffed pancakes, pastries, French fries, replacing traditional foods for lunch and dinner, like roti, vegetable curry, bread, non-vegetarian items. And then a study was undertaken to estimate different various micronutrient amounts in foods. So then it says, after their study, after they looked at micronutrients and various foods, what they found was that bakery products and sweets were found to be poor sources, and green leafy vegetables and fruits were good sources of these 5 vitamins. And they further say emphasis needs to be given to types of fruits and vegetables rich in vitamins. We know that. Even though someone is food neutral, that does not mean that they think that all food is the same nutritional profile. Just because a food has more nutrients in it or not, that's not what is meant by food neutrality. Food neutrality is being able to approach food with curiosity, compassion, and context, and making a decision that's going to best serve the goal of that meal or snack and the overall goal of how we are kind to our bodies. It is not this food is good, this food is bad thing. It's also not the same thing as all food is equal in the sense of nutrient profile. It's equal in morality, but we know that fruits and vegetables are more nutrient dense typically than pastries. Just even talking about fiber content, even if you were to have that pastry made with an enriched kind of ingredient. Overall though, they did kind of talk about some of the uncooked forms of vegetables and how their nutrient profiles can also make a difference. But as far as significance goes, again, this was one that was not convincing to make me feel comfortable with recommending a raw food diet. Another study, it was talking about how water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, pyridoxine. The study found that methods like steaming, stir-frying, and pressure cooking are generally more effective at retaining vitamins compared to like boiling. And that makes sense. When you're boiling it, if you have water-soluble vitamins, they're going to go into the water. Not all of them 100%, but a lot of it is going to be in the water. And like just from that standpoint, it makes sense how how cooking methods can make a difference in the preservation, the amount of those water soluble vitamins that are like staying in the food. But they also go on to talk about how that cooking method, like it varies depending on the vitamins and the vegetable. It provides great insight as to how cooking methods can impact like nutrient retention overall, but it doesn't specifically like advocate again for that raw diet. And then same with another one, but it was specifically focused on like green pea pods, but it also touched on how like other nutrients can be more bioavailable when it is cooked down because of some of the plants like natural ways of protecting itself, how once it's cooked those aren't like there. So overall, my biggest takeaway from all of these studies that were provided to me from that person who made that post, the biggest takeaway for me from that was to maybe not allow frozen vegetables to thaw before cooking. And specifically that would be for vitamin C. I mean, but it's just like I normally don't thaw vegetables before cooking anyway if they're frozen, so like that really doesn't change anything. Now, all of this is to say like it is so important to base dietary advice, dietary suggestions, recommendations on a wide body of evidence, not just like selective individual studies. And as personal trainers, I think it is really important to have relationships with nutrition professionals, with registered dietitians to get like evidence-based dietary recommendations. It's important to remember that personal trainers, like I'm a personal trainer too, like that is not my strong suit. I am working on that with people kind of on the side to help me feel a little bit more confident in that area because I am really interested in that area, but I also know like where my scope is and I am really trying to grow in the area because I think it's fun. But a lot of that is recognizing like how much I do know and making sure that I'm not like overly confident in recommendations. And while personal trainers, so many of them are experts in that area, that doesn't always mean that they're experts in nutrition. And just because someone has a nutrition certificate, there is no kind of set standard overall. That is why I really recommend getting board certified. I have a whole video for nutrition MLM distributors if they're wanting to really focus on health coaching, nutrition coaching. I go through what would be really helpful, but really beneficial, not just for them, but for the consumer. It's a public health kind of thing. This is not me trying to gatekeep. I'm literally giving you information on different places to go to make it more legitimate, to get more education and experience. I am trying to help people to get these certifications, like the board certifications, because there are set standards, not just for education, but also experience and continuing education. And just having a kind of like nutrition certification, there are so many great places offering nutrition ones, but there are also ones that are kind of sketchy too, because there is no like base standard. And remember that while a trainer can like point to these specific studies talking about the consumption of raw food, they might show certain benefits of more raw food intake. These studies don't necessarily endorse moving to a raw food diet. Interpreting scientific research, that requires knowledge in nutrition and dietetics, and it is so easy to just kind of pick here and there. Again, I don't say this as a way of like gatekeeping or saying anything like bad about that trainer specifically. It's more of this is a concern around misinformation, and when you are in a position where people are looking towards you because of how you've helped them with their physical fitness, it gets into, in my opinion, kind of a scary place, because this is like ultimately it's a public health kind of thing, the health and safety of consumers. And misinformation is just one of those things that just really, really frustrates me. It's one of the bases like why I created my channel in the first place. Like if you go back to like the first videos that I had before I started talking about MLM specifically, a couple months before I started really making videos, I was still talking about nutrition misinformation, because like that is ultimately what drives me to make videos and to continue making these videos, because I think consumers they deserve to not have this kind of nutrition confusion and food fear. Health doesn't have to be as complicated as the wellness industry, the dieting industry has made it. It really doesn't need to be that complicated. While there can be benefits to consuming raw foods, I'm not saying that you have to cook every single food that you eat. I eat a lot of vegetables and fruits that are not cooked, but I also eat ones that are cooked. The overall takeaway is that variety is important and you don't have to like go to extremes either way. That wraps it up for this video. Please leave a like if you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed. I would greatly appreciate that. Remember, you can strive for health without subscribing to diet culture. I'll see you later. Bye.